Now with Steve Maximay. Steve is an EU-recognized expert on climate change and was a member of the team that wrote the first risk management manual for climate change in the Caribbean. He is science advisor to ACM and by extension now to MIC, and he has worked in every CARICOM country. He is an advocate for just transitions. So it is only fitting that he is going to present right now on just transition.
Originally associated with the US labor movement in the 1970s, and it broadened as labor forged alliances with environmental justice groups in the 1990s, and it emerged in response to increased regulation of industries that were deemed to be heavy polluters. But before we get into this, I think it's only fair that we have some definitions. So a transition is a process or period of changing from one state or condition to another, and that is fairly straightforward. Where the fun begins is when we start talking about just. When you hear people talk about a just transition, we are normally assuming that they're using just as an adjective, and it is based on or behaving according to what is morally right and fair, in other words, righteous. It is being what is merited, in other words, you're getting what you just deserve, what you deserve, and it's legally correct or lawful. But there's also another interpretation of just. Just can also be an adverb, where it's only and simply. And there are times when we are being told in this part of the world to just transition. I mean, just transition, why all this fuss? It's not such a big thing. Just transition, stop being a crybaby. And you heard Jimmy, expound on all the different ways in which the global north has been telling us that. But CARICOM is no stranger to transitions, especially some of these decidedly unjust ones. We have had to do political transitions from colonialism to independence. We have had to do economic transitions from plantations to private farms to industrialization by invitation. We have had to do some industrial transitions as well, from goods to services. There was a time when this region was manufacturing or assembling goods. Now we more or less consigned to doing services, especially those connected with tourism. There was also a failure to make intellectual property, and this is an area that I'm particularly passionate about, transition from seeing intellectual property as a legal imposition as opposed to an economic imperative. And if we have time, I'd like to spend some time on that later on in terms of what do I mean by that and how our lack of appreciation for intellectual property has stymied us in our efforts to just transition. Well, when it comes to climate change occasioned transitions, then this just transition is with respect to climate change implies that all those citizens disadvantaged by adaptation and mitigation action will be buffered through socioeconomic programs that protect livelihoods. I mean, it's really a task to come after Jimmy, but I think you all got a good explanation of what is involved. So this just transition is supposed to be fostering healthy, renewable economies, and in which we are going to be moving away from fossil fuel dependence and extractive industries. And there's this idea that the just aspect of transition is steeped in moral underpinnings of self-determination with respect to communities or countries. In other words, if it's going to be just, it has to be lawful, of course, and it should be self-imposed. We should be deciding on how we are going to transition. And this is going to be very, 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 very important when we start getting into some of the nitty-gritty of these climate justice issues. So I just want to repeat that this just aspect of the transition is steeped in moral underpinnings of self-determination with respect to the communities or countries involved. When we say just transition, it has none of the compulsory overtones associated with just do it, the Nike type response. Just do it. I mean, why are you all in the Caribbean always complaining? So what's the difference between 1.5 and 2 anyway? The idea is not to compel anyone to just transition and quit complaining. So that if we are to conceptualize, live, and breathe this idea of a just, where just is an adjective, transition, then we really have to approach it differently. There's an appreciation of the fact that the changes advocated in the quest for less carbon emissions are for the benefit of humankind. So this is where all the things that Jimmy mentioned and Orum hinted at, where we are now at the intersect of law, governance, civil society, advocacy, and the science. This is what is going to help us negotiate whatever this just transition is going to turn out to be. When you think about a tourism-dependent region like the Caribbean, an industry whose carbon footprint includes airline and maritime travel, ground transportation, food miles, which is something we spend a little bit of time on, I hope. When you talk about air conditioning needs, and you saw what the projections are from Professor Taylor and the Climate Studies Group, Mona. Potable water use, and here again, I don't think anybody should mention water at this time without, at least making some sort of reference to the contribution of Dr. Seeley. Golf course irrigation, all the powered equipment that you need for the appliances and lighting and so that are associated with this tourism product, which the region has, has literally had its fill. So how do you just transition in an area that is dominated by a service industry and one in which you are on the front line as well? So what are some of the transitions that have been implied or implicated or tried to activate within the region? So we have had an amalgam of these planned mitigation as in the NDC, the nationally determined contributions. And we have had, and I'm not speaking out of school in this sense, we have had some forced adaptation-driven, very reactive policies and practices, which I am open to challenge on that, from anybody in the audience. Since agricultural production will continue to be negatively impacted by climate change, and it's going to lead to these forced adaptation-driven transitions. These transitions need to be just, adjective now, because the nutrition security of these nations will be significantly compromised.